I recently picked up the Hollywood Heroes box for Fallout Wasteland Warfare, and today we're not only going to be painting one of them, but I'm equally going to create character cards for them which you can print out and use at home. So if you're like me, then you've likely consumed the entire Fallout Prime show in less time than it takes for a new player to die in Quarry Junction in Fallout New Vegas. And as someone who plays Fallout Wasteland Warfare, I just had to pick up the Hollywood Heroes box, which contains some of the kind of key characters from the Fallout Prime show, like Lucy, Maximus, CX-404, and the Ghoul, which we're going to be painting in today's video. Now, the box of miniatures has this little booklet, which contains all the info you'll need on how to play these characters in the tabletop games, but firstly, it's in a different format than the rest of the character cards for Fallout Wasteland Warfare, and secondly, I just didn't like the stats and I didn't think they reflected the characters fully from the show. So I'm going to remake them with a little help from Bethesda and a little mostly forgotten Wasteland Warfare expansion. But first, let's get started on painting the Ghoul. So first off, I gave the Ghoul a base prime with just a black primer, and then gave it a zenithal prime with Xandri Dust by Citadel, which I'll be relying on to do a lot of the hard work for me later. If you don't know what a zenithal prime is, it's basically where we angle the primer rattle can at a 45-degree angle from the mini and just spray it in order to simulate light shining onto the miniature, which picks out some highlights and raised edges. Next, I came in with some Mornfang Brown by Citadel and painted the waistcoat very carefully so that I didn't overspill onto other areas. I really want this to be a speed paint so I can get the Ghoul onto the table quickly, and also have the Ghoul finished quite quickly with minimal effort, so if we can avoid having to go back in to fix these little areas later, that's the dream. Next, I took Rhinox Hide by Citadel and painted all of the belts and straps on the Ghoul, including his holsters. And once that was done, we're on to the fun part of this project. Contrast paints. So I took Snakebite Leather from Citadel and applied this to the Ghoul's duster coat. Because it's translucent, the Zenithal Prime we used earlier will show through the contrast paint and give a nice gradient from highlight to shadow, and equally work with the contrast paint to make a nice brown shade. I added 2 coats of this just to darken it down a bit to a more similar colour to the brown that we see on the duster coat in the show, but this cut down so much time by using contrast paints and just looks fantastic in my opinion. I equally added Basilicanum Grey contrast paint to the trousers, which also gives this really like cool, dusty and worn jean look over the Zenithal Prime, which I would need to use much more advanced painting techniques to get normally. But let's get back to character creation. You see, after the show had initially been released, Bethesda added a number of characters from the show to Fallout Shelter, the free-to-play mobile game, and in that game each character has different spatial stats just like the main video game, and because of this, we're able to see somewhat officially what spatial stats Bethesda assigned to each character, and it's this that we'll be using to form the basis of our custom character cards. So I'm going to pop over to my desktop, and with the use of some Photoshop and Canva skills, we're going to create a template for our cards. Now it goes without saying that these are completely unofficial. None of the assets I'm using here are mine. I haven't been given permission by anyone. All of those lovely things. I'm just a guy with some pretty crappy Photoshop skills. So while I get the cards designed and the files set up, let's get back to painting. So after the contrast paint had dried, it was onto the details. I took Lead Belcher from Citadel and applied this to the Ghoul's guns, and used Retributor Gold from Citadel to apply to the buttons and belt buckles and the bullet casings as well. Once this was dried, I applied Agrax Earthshade to the base, the guns, and the Ghoul's hat. Adding Agrax Earthshade over the metallics of the guns seems maybe a little bit strange since it's a brown and normally most people would add Nuln here, but it adds a nice dirty weathered effect really simply, and I really like the look of this. For the face, I added Kislev Flesh by Citadel as the base coat. I watered this down a little bit so that it wasn't too thick, as I didn't want to gunk up any of the details on the face. So if you're following this tutorial at home, don't be afraid to water it down ever so slightly and just add 2 thin coats. You don't need to really slap it on there to get it covered in one coat. Once that was dried, I took Gulliman's Flesh contrast paint by Citadel and added this to the face to add some contrast in the recesses and kind of cheat my way to have it look like I'd done some really nice highlighting work, which is what speed painting is all about. I could have used Reikland Flesh Shade here. I did actually test it a little bit and I just thought it was a little bit too red, and I wanted a more muted kind of browny earthy colour to match more with the earthy tones that we have throughout the rest of the miniature. But let's take a break here and head back to keep working on the character cards. And now that we've got the special stats in and some nice images of the characters, things are starting to come together. You can already see that there's quite a difference in stats between what Modiphius came up with and Bethesda, and obviously there's good reason for that. There's a good chance that the stats that Modiphius came up with are actually balanced, but we don't really care about balance here, we just want some cool characters, right? Maximus has a strength of 7, which is pretty much on par with a super mutant brute. Lucy has a perception of 7, which honestly, based on her wedding scene sequences, isn't really warranted, but we'll go with it. But the ghoul is the one for me that makes the most sense. Now that we've got the spatial stats in, we've got to start assigning those to their skills so that they're functional in Fallout Wasteland Warfare. So adding their heavy weapons skill, their lockpicking skill, for example. Now for this, I've gone to the handy dandy Fallout app to check other characters in the game that would bear some form of similarity in order to base this off. For Maximus, I looked at the Brotherhood of Steel Initiates, Scribes, and Knights, which is why his health is based on endurance, his firearm skills are perception, and his heavy weapon skills and melee weapon skills are strength based. For Lucy, I compared the Vault Dweller character profile and the Soul Survivor stats as I felt those were most relevant. And finally for the ghoul, perhaps more interestingly, he's actually a combination of Hancock and Charon, or Sharon, whichever one you pronounce that. And as I felt that kind of made the most sense. The charisma and slyness of Hancock combined with the deadliness of Charon seemed to be the perfect mix. The final thing to do is to add their perks and special abilities that they can use during games, and for this I first of all consulted this, the Fallout Wasteland Warfare RPG expansion. Now this doesn't get talked about a lot right now, as it was kind of the precursor to the 2D20 RPG that Modiphius made for Fallout, but there's a lot of useful information here about creating characters. And so for our ghoul, I've chosen the Dead Aim gift from the book, which enables him to ignore one item of cover when shooting, and the Gunslinger perk, which enables him to re-roll one blank black dice in a shooting test with a handgun. I thought this fitted given how good of a shot he is in the series. I did equally think of giving him the Ghoulish perk, which enables him to count radiation damage as healing, but I thought that would probably be a little bit overpowered given his already buffed stats, and plus I think he probably already gets it because he's a ghoul anyway. For Maximus, I gave him Orders, which enables him to ready an unreadied model within yellow, and for Lucy, I gave her the Lone Wanderer perk, which is super powerful, so that whenever she is fielded in a non-survivor force, she gains +1 to each armor, an additional yellow dice on assault weapon and handgun tests, as well as a bonus 2 health. But instead of me just telling you what's on these cards, why not download them yourself? I've got a link to where you can get them down in the video description, but in the meantime, here is the finished ghoul ready for the tabletop. I've no idea what points value these custom cards would have, but I've no doubt they'd be pretty costly to field. They're by no means official, so you do field them at your own risk, and they may be pretty overpowered, but I thought they may be fun to add to your games of Fallout Wasteland Warfare. So I hope you enjoy fielding them. If you do field them with these stats, let me know how it goes down in the comments, or reach out to me on Instagram. I'd love to hear what they did in your games. But in the meantime, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll speak to you next time.